Welcome to a mandatory live. We got some breaking news last night. It's officially happening, Bryan. The fight that we've all been waiting for. Terence Crawford and Errol Spence Jr. are reportedly set to fight July 29th in Vegas. And yeah, this is the fight that we all wanted to happen. Finally happening. What are your thoughts on everything that you have going into this fight?
We won't say official yet because it's still reportedly for now. But and that's not a knock on Mike Coppinger. It's just, this fight has been reported multiple times. It was going to happen in November. It's going to happen in June. There may have been a time or two or three before even that. But I hope that it's happening. I hope that it's happening, right? Like this is the fight. Tank versus Ryan was great in terms of being a spectacle. We just had Devin Haney, Vasily Lomachenko, awesome fight, and a lot of people are still mad about this guy being robbed, and it should have been this, and Devin Haney. There's been a lot of tribalism going into that fight. This is gonna be tribalism times 10 with these two, Errol Spence and Terence Crawford. But ultimately, where I'm at with this is the fight boxing needs more than anything else, right? I know it's not at the time we wanted it. Yes, it probably should have been before COVID. This has been something that's been talked about for 5 years at this point, since they first confronted each other. What was in like 2018 or whatever the case. And they still have not, I got to stop saying whatever the case. And they still, haven't made this fight. There's been a couple different times. We got a comment already from Vitaly, the homie who checks in. Disagreed with our Devin Haney, Vasily Lomachenko take, but did so respectfully. So shout out to you, Vitaly, and let me know if I'm saying your name wrong. Nobody cares about them at this point. And that's the thing. Like, you run the risk of that, Shantelle, when you're just talking for so long and the fight's not actually happening. And now we're starting to get hints and subliminal messages, and merch is being sold. Terence Crawford has a t-shirt. Errol Spence has a t-shirt. And I still think this is the biggest fight you can make. I don't know how it's going to perform. I assume well. It may not even be the best fight that week because now Inoue is going to fight Stephen Fulton that same week. But it's an awesome fight. I'm not even going to pick who I think is going to win because who knows. But Shantelle, what are your thoughts on us finally potentially getting this? Maybe, so to speak. Maybe.
Yeah, so the deal's been agreed upon, but they actually, from what I've read online and what's been reported, there hasn't been pen to paper yet, but there has been an agreement.
Yes,
There
I've heard
is
the same thing. There's been no signing yet.
There's also a rematch clause on both sides, so there's potentially a very good chance that we do get a second fight. And if they split those fights, say Bud wins the first, Errol wins the second, very good chance that we get a trilogy fight. And why not? Because both of these guys would make a lot of money doing that. It's also been reported that they're probably going to be making about $10 million each from this fight. So, good paydays for both of these guys that definitely deserve it. How do I feel about this fight? I just don't believe it. Like, I don't know if I'm like a bitter boxing fan at this point, but I'm like, is it going to be taken away from me? Is it really going to be happening? Because I feel like it was so close to happening last time and it didn't go down. So I'm like, you know what? I want to wait till it's official. But it seems like from everything that I've read, like it really is going to go down. But it's one of those things where it's one of those big fights where I'm like, it should have happened 5 years ago. The fact that it's happening now, and at least Bud's not going to be 40 when this happens, I'm still happy about that. But I do think it probably is the biggest fight since Mayweather-Pacquiao in terms of how long we anticipated that fight. Because that was a fight that we were anticipating for like the longest time. We wanted it really bad, and then we got it like 8 years too late or whatever it was. So I'm kind of happy that we are getting this fight, hopefully, fingers crossed. You know how boxing is. I got Cool Ken that just hopped in, said, I finally caught you guys live. I will believe it when they walking to the ring. Cool Ken, thanks so much for tuning in, by the way. Appreciate you, man. He makes a good point.
No, I hold on, Ken. Your comments going back up here because I agree. Damn it, I'm still skeptical. I've heard a couple different things. I think there are two sides to this, and each side has sort of been kind of blaming the other one for not putting this together. Not necessarily the two fighters themselves, but their camps. I do think they both want to make this fight happen, but I think they want to make it under their conditions. And based on everything I've heard, like that seems to be the case. And from what I've heard, nothing's been signed yet. Which Mike Coppinger did report that this is agreed upon. And I agree with you, Ken. I will believe it when there's an announcement, a press conference, we get the face-to-face, we get Terence Crawford and Errol Spence actually in the same room staring at each other wanting to fight. And but you know, there's an agreement again, and this time it feels more legitimate because a lot of people, a lot of reputable outlets beyond ESPN just seem to be running with it, right? And Mike Coppinger, look, he's obviously broken a lot of stories and fights and things of that nature. So it's not really about him. It's just, are the two sides going to kind of hold this up? And I hope that's going to be the case because, again, this is a fight that boxing needs. And when you look, Shantelle, at history, especially in the welterweight division, like all of the great welterweights, they've had like a chief rival. You know, they've had fights that you remember, whatever. And we've talked about the resume of these two guys. Like, there are some good wins on both sides here, but they need each other because these are clearly the best two welterweights of their era. It's not even close right now, right? Like Boots Ennis is coming up, Virgil Ortiz is coming up. These aren't really guys that are in the Errol Spence, Terence Crawford class, though, right? Keith Thurman, respectfully, not in that class right now, right? And I just think that when you look at other great welterweights, Floyd Mayweather, Manny Pacquiao, who you just touched on, other guys from more recent eras too, like Felix Trinidad, Miguel Cotto, Canelo Alvarez was welterweight at one point, Shane Mosley. And then if you go back further to like, you know, Armstrong, Kid Gallivan and shit, like all of the welterweights, Sugar Ray Robinson, Sugar Ray Leonard, all of the welterweights had chief rivals in their division. And these guys are the guys that need to fight in order for their legacies, even if it's at this time right now and it's a little bit later. I think it's big that they would still do it. I just, you know, I believe it when I see it, but I hope that they put it together.
Yeah, I think you make a pretty good point in terms of like they kind of need each other because I think the biggest story going into this is who is the true king at welterweight because everyone's kind of had this debate whether they're rocking with Bud, whether they're rocking with Spence. And I think that's one of the biggest conversations. You talked about two guys that are waiting for Bud and Spence to move up. You're talking about Virgil Ortiz, you know, Boots Ennis, who just came off kind of a questionable fight. But nonetheless, they're kind of waiting to be the next kings of this division. Whereas we're still trying to find out if Bud is the true pound for pound king or if it's Errol Spence Jr. Now, the one thing that I do want to mention is both these guys have had big layoffs. It's been a minute since we've seen Spence in the ring. And of course, we've seen, you know, Terence Crawford against David Evanesian. Now, that was a fight on BLK Prime that initially on that day, we thought we were going to get Spence and Bud. We ended up getting that fight, but Bud put on a good performance, ended up getting the knockout. And these two guys have also fought Sean Porter. Now, I do want to mention in that Sean Porter fight, when he fought Spence, I thought that was a draw. And
You did?
Bud, I
Okay.
did. I had it as a draw.
I think it was a split decision also.
It was a very, close. Very close fight.
I had Errol Spence edging it out.
No, I was a draw. But anyways, and then when Bud fought Spence, and of course it was a few years later. I mean, sorry, when Bud fought Sean Porter, a few years later, of course, Bud ends up getting, you know, the stoppage there. So it's just one of those things where these guys both have names on their resume. And then you take a look at Spence and he's been through a car accident. He had that, you know, orbital surgery or whatever it was for his eye. So he's gone through some things and then the layoff. So coming into this fight, I was actually thinking, like, should they have a tune-up fight? But I think no one wants to see these guys fight anybody else but each other.
So Errol Spence, it was a split decision. 116, 111, 116, 111, both for him. And then there was a 115, 112 for Sean Porter in that fight. I thought that Errol Spence edged it out. He also, and I think the knockdown sort of sealed it. So I gave it to him by a point.
I had it as a draw, but okay.
Regardless. So
that's the blueprint though. Like so
you had the knockdown in the even round and an even round somewhere. There were some close rounds. But look, I think that Sean Porter is Terence Crawford's best win, and could argue that it's Errol Spence's best win as well. He did beat Kell Brook, but that was right after the Triple G.
Danny Garcia, I think, is a big one on Spence's record.
Danny Garcia he performed better in that fight. But Sean Porter is one of these dudes that I really respect because he got in the ring with a lot of different guys and he took out some top dudes. He hung in there with Keith Thurman and what was fight of the year,
Yeah.
probably. Even though I might argue that I was at the fight of the year 1 month later with Leo Santa Cruz and Carl Frampton.
Just another flex.
The-
Just another flex. But I do want to add. I do want to add to what you were just saying. You mentioned. I mentioned Danny Garcia because I actually thought that was a big fight for Spence because he was coming off that car accident and
Yeah.
he picked as a tune-up Danny Garcia. Like Danny Garcia is not no tune-up. And that's a really good fight. And that's the first time that I saw Danny Garcia really struggle in the ring. And so Spence is one of those guys. We know how skilled he is. He has the size advantage over Bud as well. I feel like he knows how to mix it up and he knows what the judges like. So when it goes to the scorecards, you know, they're always giving rounds to Spence. But this fight tactically is going to be so interesting because when you take a look at their styles, like Bud can knock you out with both of his hands. Switch hitter, got power in both of his hands. And that's the thing. Like you kind of sometimes don't see those knockouts coming. He's very elusive. So this is going to be a really good fight. I already know who I'm rolling with.
You have a pick over?
I've been thinking about this for 5 years, right? Yeah, I got a pick. Okay.
So before we we should get that on the show. Before we get into that, right? And to the shout out to the podcast audience who's probably going to hear this later as well. Maybe the odds will be updated at that point, but there are odds for this
already. Okay, read them.
No, there have been odds for this. They just haven't been taken down because people are like waiting. I remember when we were both at FanDuel. I remember in 2022 or 2021. No, it was whatever it was. It was like they had Bud Spence odds. It was like even both ways. And they had it just December 31st, 2021 or 2022, whatever, because there wasn't a date for it, but they just wanted action on it, I guess. Right now, looking at the odds, it says July 30th, okay, which is, you know, it says July 30th. The date's actually July 29th, but it says July 30th at midnight, and it's 112 even, both ways. Errol Spence, it's a pick'em. It's essentially
the fight is a 50-50 fight.
Yeah. No, this is a true 50-50 fight. Errol Spence to win on points plus 160. Errol Spence to win by knockout plus 500. Terence Crawford to win on points plus 210. That's interesting. And you just talked about Errol Spence being able to give the judges what they like in winning rounds. That's indicative of what you're saying. Terence Crawford to win by knockout plus 360. So Terence Crawford to win by knockout plus 360. Errol Spence to win by knockout plus 500 is interesting. Shorter odds for Terence Crawford by that much to win by knockout?
Who's making these books, okay? Who's putting these lines out? Because I would rather bet on Bud getting the knockout than Spence because Bud's got that power, right? I think Spence has power too, but it's different. Like I think Bud has vicious power. And he's gotten that power when he moved to the welterweight division. Like he's been knocking out everybody since he got to the welterweight division, which is so interesting.
Can I give you a couple more?
Yeah, I got to hear this.
Okay, group round betting. I mean, no, not group round betting yet. Hold on. Before that, draw, by the way, plus 1,600. I think that's relevant here. And then will the fight go to distance? Minus 200, yes. Plus 154, no. I've always thought this was a distance fight, but hey, we've had super fights that have shockingly ended sooner. You know what I mean? Like that's definitely happened before. And then a last couple things on the let's go to the group round betting front. Terence Crawford to win round 7 through 12 plus 500. Errol Spence to win round 7 through 12 plus 750. The books seem to think that Terence Crawford will get this, like if he were to win, that he would get the stoppage, or it's at least more debatable. Is he going to stop him or do it on points? And to Terence Crawford's credit, he's actually knocked out, 10 straight opponents at this point? I think they've all been welterweights. Like he's one of these guys, like he got stronger as he actually moved up in weight.
But those 10 straight opponents are not Errol Spence.
Correct. That's the thing.
It's like, you know, it's totally different. So that's the thing. I think it's a true 50-50 fight. I'm just going to give my pick. I don't even care. I'm rolling with Bud in this fight. I've been thinking about it for 5 years. I'm going to roll with Bud. I wouldn't be surprised if the first fight is a draw. Because I also just don't see Spence being stopped like that. Spence is too good. So I do think it's one of those things that goes the distance. If you think you're going to roll with, you know, Spence's skill, Bud has skill too. Like when you actually go and you knock off, you know, each of their attributes, it's a 50-50 fight and it can go either way. I'm rocking with Bud in this fight though. Are you going to at least give your pick? We're not going to break things down entirely because of course we're going to give that to you in July. And of course, we're going to have a, what if Spence wins? What if Bud wins? Of course, there's a rematch clause. There's 30 days for the loser to activate that. So we will get a second fight, most likely.
If there's a loser. We might get a draw and there'll be a rematch anyway.
Yeah.
I gotta be honest, like I've been leaning the entire time that Terence Crawford will win this fight. Like I've always kind of leaned Bud like a 115, 113, just very close decision where he kind of just it starts off a little bit. Terence Crawford is not a fast starter. Typically he could be if he feels like it, right? But
once he figures you out though, by the 4th round, it's a wrap.
In a fight like this, I don't think Terence Crawford would start fast. And I think Errol Spence will be putting the pressure on him. But like I think Terence Crawford, like I just trust his boxing ability and being able to switch hit, which I'm not sure how much he's going to do that against a southpaw, but we've seen him do it. Like he doesn't care. And he just the way he adjusts mid-fight. Like you could compare him to like Eric Spoelstra in a way. It's crazy. Like he makes such good. Well, what
you gonna do a Heat reference? Like what is this? What is this? You give a Heat reference?
He is.
How was the game last night?
He was so tactically good at making adjustments during the fight. He just is. I think he's one of the best, and I think he's somebody who's going like the second half of the fight. He kicks it into another gear. Like if we were to size up the fight in that way, but we can preview all of it later on. It's just my gut has sort of told me Terence Crawford maybe edges this out. But if you think Errol Spence is going to win, anybody watching this, like I would not tell you you're going to be wrong because this is what boxing should be. It should be 50-50 fights. It should be super fights, champion versus champion or champion versus credible challenger. But in this case, champion versus champion, undisputed. I could see Errol Spence absolutely winning this fight, especially with body punching. Limiting Terence Crawford's movement. I think that's how he would get it done. Pressuring, being able to evade him enough defensively. But, I think Ugas did some good things against Errol Spence. I think Sean Porter did some good things against Errol Spence that Terence Crawford would be able to maximize. And I also think that, like you mentioned the layoff, Errol Spence hasn't fought since April of 2022. Terence Crawford at least fought in December. And he's going to have a 7-month gap in between fights, not a, 15-month gap in between fights. So I think that's something to, be wary of. But Errol Spence is going to be in shape. I think the line it's even now. I think more money is going to come in on Bud because of the tactics and things of that nature. I think it'll mostly stay level, but I think Bud might end up being a narrow favorite if I had to predict. The layoff could be part of it, but I absolutely think Errol Spence could win this fight for sure. I don't think anybody's going to get knocked out, though. I don't think anybody's going to get knocked out.
I think it's one of those fights that the first one definitely does go the distance. Also, let's factor in age. Like, if the first fight does happen, remember, it's been reported, so it seems like it, but as boxing fans, we got to be a little bit cautious here. So if the first fight does happen, and I honestly think it goes the distance, say it's a draw, then they do a second fight, depending on when the second fight is. Like Bud's going to be a little bit older. Spence is going to be a little bit older. So I don't know how those things factor in. However, it's something to also take of note, right? Because when Triple G and Gennady Golovkin went in for the third time, you saw Gennady Golovkin be a different Triple G, right? A little bit older. And it honestly, it was sad to watch, to be honest, as a Triple G fan. But that's nonetheless, I was just going to make a point in saying that. So it's interesting that both you and I are going to take Bud for this one that we're seeing right now.
As of now, I reserve the right to change my mind. I don't think I will. I reserve the right to change my mind.
A lot of people that I know are looking at me crazy because I'm taking Bud and they're taking Spence. So I actually think it really is going to be a 50-50 crowd. And it's like a 50-50 type of bet type of thing as well.
There are a lot of people. There are just a lot of people who are going to ride for one side or the other, like just blindly, right? I think there's a lot of people that I see on different social medias, people I talk to, like they love one guy, hate the other, or really like one guy, dislike the other. And I think there's just going to be a lot of tribalism into this fight. It's going to be, a lot of people that love Errol Spence, a lot of people that love Terence Crawford. It's going to be divisive in that way. I think of the people that I know that are sort of looking at this fight in a little more through an objective lens. Yeah, it's a pick 'em. It's kind of split. Some people favor Errol Spence's power, pressure. Terence Crawford got some power too, but his power.
Bud's got real power.
Yeah. The body punching. And then other people, like I tend to lean towards who's the better all-around boxer in this type of fight. And I think Terence Crawford's got a slight advantage, but Errol Spence is very underrated, like just overall, right? In terms of his defensive abilities and how he's able to counter you at times. Errol Spence, by the way, 33 years old, since we mentioned age. Terence Crawford will be turning 36 in September. So he's 35 at the time of this fight. Reportedly will go down, but he's going to be 36 in September. So that rematch, he'll be 36. He hasn't been in a lot of wars, though. So I do think he will age gracefully, and we'll see. We'll see what happens in this fight.
I think the best part about it is at the end of it, whether we do get a rematch, we probably will. If we get a trilogy fight, we're going to actually know who the real king is of the welterweight division before they move on. And who knows, like after these fights, either of them could retire if they wanted to. And you just talked about, Bud being a little bit older. If there was a second fight, he'd be 36. And I think it's one of those things that, yeah, either of these guys could retire after that, especially if they rack up 2 wins against each other. Like, say if Bud beats him twice or Spence beats Bud twice. Yeah. It's one of those things where they could just sail off into the sunset if they wanted to.
I would probably do that, especially because of the money they're going to generate.
Exactly. So what would be the point? But nonetheless, boxing fans, we're finally getting the fight that we've always wanted to see. I don't actually think it's too late. Yeah. I mean, let's not get too excited, right? But I don't think it's too late. Like, people are like, is it 5 years too late? Sure. But at the same time, it's not like Bud's 40 years old, right? If Bud was like 39, even 38, I'd be like, it's too late. But I think we're getting it at a time where boxing needs it. We just had a massive fight, Devin Haney, Vasily Lomachenko, lots of controversy. Will this one have controversy? We'll wait to find out. If you like the content, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Make sure to follow us on our social media platforms. Everyone who left a message, dropped a comment, thank you so much for rocking with us. We're going to have more content on this, obviously, coming out. So keep it locked on the mandatory channels, YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, IG. We're all over that. Bryan, any last words before we get up out of here?
Unless something else crazy breaks, you will be hearing from us again next week. We got some good stuff planned. And June is gonna be a great month. I could already feel it. Check out the Heather Hardy interview. We talked to Heather Hardy, former world champion, current #1 contender for the undisputed featherweight title. She fought Amanda Serrano and will fight her again August 5th. We had a nice conversation with Heather Hardy about that. And we got some other stuff in the works, including guests and more analysis. There are a lot of fights in June worth breaking down. We're going to break them down. We got Clarissa Shields next weekend. And then the week after that, we have Teofimo Lopez and Josh Taylor. So a lot coming up here at The Mandatory.
All right. Thanks so much for rocking with us on one of our lives. And we'll definitely be doing some more soon. And let us know your thoughts. Let us know who you got early on. If you got Terence Crawford or if you got Errol Spence Jr. Thanks so much. We out.